I try not to have any friends. It's very simple. And then I have a lot less problems.
That actually makes it sound like a lot easier.
Well, no, my attitude is that, everyone's my friend, right? It's like it's a question of what you're interested in. It's not a question of whether we're friends or not. It's a question of, are we interested in the same things?
At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. Then you're my friend. Because, hey, cool thing that X that you like and I like, hey, awesome. Usually it's, sex. I'm just kidding. Or money. Sometimes money, because I like money.
Oh, good. Well,
you like money too?
Yeah, let's talk about money. I want to talk about the internet.
Yes,
we have.
Yeah, go for it. This is a great one.
Well, here's my agenda for today. Let's make a list. Number one.
Your agenda for today on Stack Exchange Podcast number 29.
Where is the deli sign?
We are working it. They're really expensive.
Deli signs
They're
are
literally
expensive.
$300.
Seriously, if there's anybody listening who took some kind of like electronics course in high school and knows how to buy one of those little LED number displays that have like the 7-segment digits and can purchase a counter chip and a button, then I would always know what Stack Exchange podcast we're on.
You could have just said someone who can build us one of the deli number counter signs.
Okay, and we have on the agenda for today is to talk about SOPA, which is so bad, and that wasn't very good. Also known as Protect IP, it's slightly different laws. And our guest today is Chris Poole. Hey, Chris.
Hey.
And Chris is known to the public as Moot, which is his handle on 4chan. But he's now got a second company, which is Canvas. Canv.as, or just canvas.com, probably, right?
No, that they want $1 million for us. Until we raise more money, that is not going to be ours.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't you tell us this story already?
It's just a...
This is his first time on the podcast, Alex.
No, at NYU. When we were at NYU, he was telling us.
It might have been. It's owned by a professional domainer, and I think every domainer thinks that all of their domains are worth 7 to 8 figures, probably, as you guys already know. So...
Yeah. What's harder is when there's somebody there squatting on the site, getting email and operating their business.
Well, they're not. Did you go to canvas.com? This is a lame thing. I mean, it's like not just squatting, but like if you go there, they try to trick you into used car sales crap.
Oh, okay. Well, why are you telling me to go there? Then I won't.
I'm saying
Wait,
they're using it for madness. They're not using it for. They're not running
evil.
a legit business that
right.
We would feel sorry for. It's like
or we'll feel like they deserve $1 billion.
Exactly.
It says the words "thank you," but it doesn't in the YouTube logo style. I'll put a screenshot of this in the notes. I'll put a screenshot of this in the notes. It's hilarious.
Okay. So 4chan, let's start with that, actually, because 4chan is really interesting because it is the exact opposite in every way of Stack Overflow and the Stack Exchange network.
Well, not in every way.
It's on the internet.
Well, no, not exactly. I mean, the identity stuff is interesting because we said for a long time that we didn't really care who you were. Like,
that's actually true. Yeah, you did.
And
just
that's why
say
it's odd. On Canvas, you have to sign up with Facebook because to me, it's like it's what you know that's interesting. It's not necessarily who you are. It's what you know and whether you're willing to share that with other people in a way that they can understand. That is the really interesting thing. And if you become known for that, that's great. But who you are is relevant. Like, it's peripherally relevant, but not like the central thing.
Well, in the case of Canvas, it's important to note that we only use Facebook, and you don't actually sign in using Facebook. You just kind of authenticate your native Canvas registration using Facebook. And the point is, we wanted to kind of insert friction into the sign-up process to discourage kind of like your more casual trolls. And also, capture first name and email address because we send people emails with their permission.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do actually have your registration, you can post on the site using a handle, and you can post anonymously. You can just check a checkbox and post anonymously. So I totally agree as far as kind of, with 4chan, the point has always been kind of content over creator, championing the content of what you're saying and not just you being a kind of known person to the community. So I think we're totally in agreement on that.
Excellent. Well, you should put that little disclaimer. Like,
we used to do a better job with that, but again, we've kind of said that it's for the beta period, and so again, it'll be something that'll be removed from the site at some point in the future.
Okay, cool. Well, that certainly explains that then.
So, working my way backwards, I think so. Canvas is sort of one of these photo chat or image based chat, right? It's kind of like we're using images to have entertaining conversations on the internet. Is that a good way of describing it?
Yeah, originally the goal was to kind of reimagine message boards in the sense that the forum function aesthetic of a kind of what we know as a forum hasn't changed from vBulletin, PHPBB in a very, very long time.
Well, that was just copies of old Usenet.
Right, exactly, of like Usenet and dial-up BBS. And so we kind of wanted to reimagine what a kind of a message board experience would be, especially with an emphasis on media and whatnot, and kind of like real time would feel like. And it's shifted quite a bit. And we started. The initial product was very heavily images, and we added in two things, stickers, just kind of a really easy way of tagging things visually, and remix. And the remix is the thing that it was an obvious feature because we were starting with images, so of course we want to let you edit those images. But I think we've been really kind of genuinely surprised at how the community totally grabbed on to that, and the kind of the culture of remix and co-creation on the site is huge. So yeah, it became more of a kind of like collaborative, like image kind of talking and kind of playing with images.
You kind of have an image and you're sort of batting it back and forth with a bunch of other people, each sort of embellishing it to make it funnier or cleverer or wittier or more poignant or whatever it may be. Usually funnier. Well, how did that evolve out of your 4chan experience, and why didn't you just go legit with 4chan?
So that's like one of the things that a lot of, I think originally VCs and people in the kind of industry had asked was like, if you have this huge thing, I mean, 4chan is now 8 years old. It has somewhere in between, depending who you ask. If you ask Quantcast, 8 or something. If you ask Google, 18 million unique visitors a month and more than 500 million page views. And so it's this huge thing. And so it seems like a no-brainer. Okay, well, why wouldn't you just make that better or make it different? And I mean, the fact that it is 8 years old and so huge is the reason that I basically can't. People have come to appreciate the site for what it is, and they are not a kind of a community that you would think of as being very receptive to change in any way. So to kind of take what they really love right now and to say, hey, look, we're going to kind of change this a lot to kind of suit my personal interests. I want to work on something new. Wouldn't really jive very well with the community, and so the decision was made to kind of, in order to explore kind of new ideas, and in order to kind of build a new community to just kind of start fresh, it had to be done, separate from 4chan.
Yeah, makes sense. What 4chan is weird. There's a few things that I don't think people notice there. One is stuff doesn't last very long on 4chan, right? There's no sort of permanent record. Right.
The two kind of features that make it stand out in a sense are the fact that it's anonymous. There's no kind of registration at all. I mean, it's anonymous on the kind of the front side of it. Users are anonymous to one another. We do use IP addresses to ban people. We can see IP addresses, so it's not like Tor. It's on 100% totally Wild West anonymous. But for all intents and purposes, people don't know who you are unless you choose to be identified by a name, by handle. But you can't actually register that name, and it's ephemeral. There's no archive. There are about 16 pages per board, and say 10 threads a page, 160 threads a board, and so every single new thread that's posted, at least one thread has to be bumped off, and so content only lasts a matter of minutes, to 2 hours in some cases if it gets a lot of pickup or if it's on a slower board.
So it's almost like a chat room with no log.
Yeah, essentially.
And of course, the subject matter of a site that is completely anonymous, was that something that you always intended to be the subject matter, or did the community evolve? Like I feel like if you look at Reddit over its history, the content of the front page changed so dramatically from the first year to what they have there now. I mean, just the subject matter of the site just changed completely. Did something similar happen there with 4chan, or was it always the same kind of?
No, I mean, it's changed a lot because when it was founded, I mean, it's modeled after a Japanese site called Futaba Channel, 2chan.net. And I found that when I was 15 years old and was like into anime for a summer, and took their code and translated it into English, threw it up on a shared web hosting account, seeded it to 20 people. And so that initial audience was, were people very into kind of Japanese animation, Japanese culture. And so all of the original boards, I mean, the /b/ board that is, notorious. I mean, that's where a lot of the traffic goes, and why a lot of people know the site, because B is where all the kind of memes are created and whatnot. That started as anime/random, and eventually the anime got dropped from it and sharded into its own board, /A, and B was just random. And so a lot of those original boards all had to do with anime and kind of Japanese things, and so that was the dominant culture on the site. And then over time, I mean, it kind of went to the adjacent interests like video games and television and stuff like that. And now, there are people think of it as kind of like very porny and still very Japanese, but the fact is we have something like 50 different subcategories, and they range from photography to paper, origami to cooking, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, like 4chan, like obviously it's a huge phenomenon, and I know about it, and I definitely respect it because we had one way somebody emailed us this random thing where like, oh, 4chan said that they're going to attack Stack Overflow, and I was like, okay, they probably won't, first of all, but I was a little nervous, to be honest.
They did attack Tumblr.
Yeah, because this was around that time, and I just ignored it, and nothing happened. But my issue with 4chan, well, not issue, maybe it's not the right word, is my fear. Like, I'm kind of afraid to go there because I've seen images on the internet that, like, I can't unsee now. you know? And I'm sure you have, too, and it's, like, kind of sad that we all see those images, and, like, that's really what I'm afraid of. Like, I don't know, like, I totally support people being anonymous, but, like, unmoderated stuff, just, man, it just... I don't want to see things I can't unsee.
I mean, it's not a problem that's unique to us. Obviously, like any site with user-generated content wrangles with these problems, but we have it kind of uniquely in the sense that when you think about a site like, I don't know, YouTube, right, or Flickr, the way you get distribution on those sites is you have to have something that's kind of trending and really popular, or you have to be linked to it directly. And so there's not really, like, most people don't consume YouTube really, I think, through channels, right, or Flickr through the feeds and whatnot. Like Flickr, you end up on links and albums kind of directly, or through your own kind of personal feed. And YouTube, you either search for something or you click a link to it. And so 4chan has this this like incredible kind of distribution built into it, where every single new post ends up at position 0 on page 0, and so you have the ability to blast out a message to in the case of random, you have 10,000 people browsing it at almost all hours of the day just on that root page. And so with 5 seconds of effort, you can push out an image or a comment to potentially thousands of people. I mean, it represents like an incredible bang for your buck in that sense. And actually, I remember once there was an FBI agent asked me this because somebody had posted a bomb threat on 4chan. And he said, Chris, why on earth would anybody do this on 4chan? And my response was, you wouldn't yell fire in an empty theater. So it represents this kind of like, you've got lots of people there, and it takes you 5 seconds to get a message out. And so we have this, like, we've gotten this kind of terrible reputation over the years for, like the most unsavory of content, when in fact that represents like, 0.0001% of all content, but it just, gets blasted out to everybody. And so you come to associate the site with that.
There's no voting or anything like Reddit has. Everything gets the same amount of distribution, which means that John Gabriel's greater internet. Can I say that word? Do we have? Can I say?
Yes, you can
on the podcast.
You can say fuck what.
No, but don't we have a clean rating? Or
no, we don't.
The John Gabriel's children, stop listening right now. John Gabriel's greater internet fuckwad theory. Google that. Which is basically the theory that says normal person plus anonymity plus an audience equals total fuckwad. So basically people
it sounds like
otherwise normal people, if allowed to be anonymous and given a large audience, often blurt out things.
It sounds like to me more just sort of standard news reporting. The reason we hear about the content is that's what's the 0.001 is that's the sensational content. It's the same reason as nobody writes about planes that don't crash. They only write about the planes that do, even though 99.99999% of planes never crash.
Correct. I'm going to paste a link of this in the chat room because it's not so easily found on Google. It takes at least 2 clicks. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Yes, so anonymous.
Well, one thing I do want to mention is if you go to the Wikipedia article for 4chan, which I did because I wasn't super familiar with the history, I'd kind of forgotten, but I guess in the back of my mind I knew that a lot of the memes we know on the internet do actually come from 4chan, or at least can be traced directly back, like lolcats, right, which everybody knows now and is like almost mainstream, right, which is weird.
It's beyond mainstream, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Rick Rolling, that came from 4chan. Chocolate Rain, a personal favorite. Pedo Bear, I'm Pedo Bear, not a huge fan of that. And yeah, not so into that. And then something about the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, which I don't know, but apparently that's a real show. Chris, actually, do you know this one? I don't actually know this one that well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a show on Cartoon Network, and I think somebody that was involved in the Powerpuff Girls show is involved in its writing or creation or direction or whatnot. But it's a show that's kind of like a totally kind of a cult. It's a hit with children, but also has like a cult following of kind of teenage and older audience, and a lot of them happen to use 4chan.
Doesn't it have a lot of inside references to internet stuff? That was my understanding.
It might. I honestly don't know.
The little I know.
I actually haven't had a TV in like many years, so I don't watch any like broadcast television. But I mean, the Powerpuff Girls. I could be totally wrong and insulting somebody right now, but I think again, there's like a similarity there where like I remember watching Powerpuff Girls like with like years and years ago a few times and like being surprised at the number of kind of almost like not innuendo, but kind of like double meanings and kind of like in references, like, oh my god, this is a children's show. So it might have the same kind of like brand of humor, or kind of like
hide something there for the stoners in college as well. What's that? You told me something. I said a site like 4chan has absolutely no reputation system. It doesn't. You can't even earn. If most people are posting as anonymous. So let me see if I understand. Like from a technical point of view, you could theoretically attach a name to a post, and if you fail to do so, it just says that it's from anonymous, right? And that's what 95% of the posts are just posted as anonymous. So essentially, even the heavy participants don't become known on the site. Like nobody says, "Oh yeah, that's that guy. I like him," or "I want to follow that person's thing," or "That person is smart, and so I will see what he says," or anything like that. Just doesn't. You're basically not earning any reputation on the site, which I think Clay Shirky says is sort of a kind of a critical part of an online community-generated kind of system, is that people have the ability to start to earn reputation.
I mean, we thought about this. I think you and I have spoken about this personally, but like I think one of the almost like an anomaly on a site like 4chan is we have a board called /r requests. And you think that, like on every other forum on the internet, you can you have some way of accumulating social capital, or some way of kind of showing your age superiority. So you've got number of posts, registration date, unique user ID, number of thanks, stuff like that. Yep. And unfortunately, you have none of that. And so you would think that like a board called /requests, where all people do is ask for more of an image or a link to something, and like what is your incentive as a user of the site to go there and then help people fill requests if you can't get anything kind of out of it? And so it's true that there's not like an external kind of accumulation of capital, but it's more of like an internal motivation of like, oh, like I'm helping somebody. And I think past that, in terms of like, I think for a lot of especially younger people, it's kind of you get that reputation of, like, I remember I was the first kid, I was always kind of like tuned into the web because I like to say I was raised on forums and chat rooms. And so when like peanut butter jelly time 10 years ago was a thing, and like badger and all those kind of like things that we now look back on and like, oh god, those little silly memes. I was the first kid in my school to know those and to kind of like tell my friends, and we had like the kind of the pulse of the web. And so I think for a lot of like younger people that use 4chan, if you're kind of tapped into like /b in that community, you kind of know of like cool internet things before anybody else does, and then you become the guy within your kind of friend circle who has that kind of a pulse and gets to kind of like share that with your friends and your school. And so I think there's something else there in terms of like, maybe you're not getting social capital on the site, on the internet, but you're kind of collecting social capital within your own kind of offline network. You're
getting it in real life because you find the funny pictures before anybody else does and post them.
You post them on
Facebook or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. We definitely have that in our company chat room.
That's Jin. Jin does that for us.
And I assume he's not getting them from 4chan.
He's probably on 4chan right now.
He could be.
It's possible. I think he's more of a stumble upon kind of guy, but
yeah. So it's sort of interesting that the site doesn't even have to have its own system as long as it's producing a bunch of memes. Well, and what's interesting is actually a lot of those memes then show up on Reddit, which is sort of the second distribution point for them. It's almost like there's kind of a big stew of all kinds of simmering memes going on 4chan, and then there are people that kind of wade into there and pluck things out and go post them on Reddit for karma on Reddit, and then they get voted on Reddit up to the front page if they're good. So there's a sort of secondary ranking of the memes.
That's definitely been a sore spot for both communities, because 4chaners feel very strongly about things that are created on 4chan. God forbid they leave 4chan, and so they're kind of upset when they see something that they feel that they had a hand in kind of on Reddit, and the Redditors too.
I liked Eminem before that stupid 8 Mile movie came out.
Exactly.
Now every friggin' suburban mom wants to listen to Eminem.
But then the people on Reddit are saying, well, they're very sensitive to like Reddit has its own community, its own culture, and they're saying, get your stupid 4chan memes off of here. Where when you look at the front page, you can definitely see. I think 4chan is like so people refer to it as a meme factory and kind of like the dark heart of the internet, and so it's responsible for producing and kind of exporting a lot of that, a lot of those memes, or taking something that is kind of getting popular elsewhere and then kind of like pouring gas on it and getting it out there in a way that few communities can, just because the number of people on it and how connected those people are. But it, like the 4chan kind of humor and culture the 4chan kind of humor and influence has definitely, I think, had a large effect on internet culture as a whole. And so a lot of things, like the macroed images with impact font. I mean, it's not the first community to do that to an image, but it's certainly like a lot of the memes have that, and it's responsible for kind of just helping, I think, kind of tip, trying to trend things in a certain way. And so a lot of humor, even if it doesn't originate from 4chan, feels almost like a little bit of that. Like you can almost see the DNA in it.
Mm-hmm.
So Joel, maybe 4chan. We're seeing a lot of sort of more image-based stuff on the net. Like this thing, my wife is into Pinterest.
Pinterest, yeah.
Which is apparently 70% women. Like I read an article recently
Is that
because I
all?
asked her about it, and she's like, "Oh, you might like it." She's like, "No, it's all ladies. You wouldn't like it."
Yeah, I thought it would be like 80 or 90.
It's
Yeah.
70 according to this article I read. I don't know how reliable that was, but it's heavily image based. And then Joel and I talked about this before. How on Reddit there's sort of a race to the bottom on a lot of Reddit to like everything devolves into posting images, right? Like because that's the fastest thing to consume. It's also the most efficient, really. If you think about it, I mean, words are hard, right? Words are complicated and hard.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean if your goal is to consume as rapidly as possible.
Yeah.
To just get information into your brain as rapidly as possible, then it's probably images is the way to go. And also, I think in terms of shopping, I mean, not to stereotype women into shopping, but for shopping, it's a browsing experience. Like you have to look at a ton of stuff to figure out like what it is you even want, right? Words are not that helpful in that scenario.
No.
And I think that's what I'm and a lot of craft stuff too, not just commercial stuff. But that's what I'm hearing about Pinterest, and maybe 4chan was sort of first to sort of tap into this sort of this race to the images,
I think, yeah, I mean, it launched as it's an image board, and you could embed images on old school forums like vBulletin and PHPB, but they weren't actually built for that. And so, kind of centering a discussion around seeding a conversation with images and then replying with comments and images. Yeah, it's something I think when you look at our traffic, it's more than 50% is in the U.S., but it's lots of kind of countries with English as a first language, but then lots of countries that not English as a first language, because images are right. You can parse them really like lightning speed in your mind, and even at like the thumbnail scale too, like figure out like, oh, is that something I want to like view a big size of, or you can just like ratchet your scroll wheel, go down a page really quickly and just suck in a lot of information. And it's something that images kind of transcend language and kind of cultural barriers too, because unless it's you have like really dense lolcat that has like 3 paragraphs of English and like literary like masterpiece on it, like most people if they don't speak English will kind of understand the humor in like pidgin English, and again and most images don't even have text on them, and so it's something where it made the site really accessible to a broad audience of people who do speak English and who don't, and could just really rapidly just suck in tons of content and enjoy it.
There's also, in the case of Reddit, I think you actually get a voting advantage if you can get people looking at your thing, coming back to the site and voting in the fastest. You'll get more. It just helps the homepage algorithm essentially. So they have. I think that was an accidental thing in the case of Reddit, that they devolved into very, very quick things that people can read very quickly. Otherwise, I mean, if you tried to post a Joel on Software blog post, which is 2,000 words, about 8 pages on average. Nobody would be able to read it and come back in time to vote it up, in time to get it up on the homepage of Reddit. It just wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to just the demand for kind of like long form content has, we've been trending away from that for ages now, like WordPress to Tumblr to Twitter, and from kind of text to images. It's just people are, we're used to now to just having loads of information shown to us, and I think people are starting to appreciate kind of like short form language, and then images and short videos like that.
Does one of the listeners asks, what are exploding knees?
It's my Twitter. If you go to twitter.com/moot, that is my background image. I don't know. I love that kid. He's awesome.
Okay. Wait, twitter.com/ I didn't even see it. Oh yeah, look at that. His knees are exploding. Sure enough, it's a meme. What? So, how does Canvas just differ? I guess. So, Canvas, if I have to describe, first of all, you have to log on with Facebook, but you said that's
you can browse it without logging in though, so you can get a sense for it.
Yeah.
Again, not canvas.com, canv.as.
canv.as, and there's a bunch of pictures there, and you could throw. This is the thing I liked. You can throw like little stickers on the picture, like this is funny or this is whatever, different stickers that allow you. And then a picture might have 50 funny stickers, meaning 50 people have sort of given a gesture to that author, to that picture creator, that it's awesome. And people reply with pictures. What's the business model of this here? We're going to make money on this.
I think we're interested in exploring what we can do with. Like I remember actually when so obviously 4chan is a bootstrap, 15 years old, kind of mom's basement kind of a company, and Canvas is an actual venture-backed company. Mm-hmm. And I remember an investor asked that a year ago. They said, "How are you going to make money?" And I said, "The one way I can tell you I'm not going to make money is display ads. And he was like, what? Why wouldn't you run display ads? And I was just like, the thought of having to carve out 300 by 250 pixels on every page like makes me ill. And it's something that I've had to deal with 4chan. Is like 4chan has only been monetized through banner ads, and it's just like horrible. It's just a terrible model. And so I think like originally we said, okay, well the way we're going to make money is we're going to find real, genuine ways of delivering value and figure out a way to kind of like insert ourselves in that process and make like a nominal amount of money for it. And I think that the two things that are most interesting to us right now are we have the stickers on the site where you can kind of like react to things, score things. I mean, all of the kind of ranking algorithms have to do with with the stickers. So we do have that kind of it is essentially voting. And we think that there's something interesting there. I mean, as far as we have a sticker, the number one sticker, which is limited, and you kind of just collect them by posting content that people like. Enough people give you stickers, then you get a few of those, and you can kind of trade them up for cooler stickers. And so, and then when you use those, they kind of like look different and cooler, and they also count for more, and so they're weighted more, and so you essentially are getting more distribution because your thing will get kind of rocketed to the top of the popular page. Oh, yeah. So we think that that's that's interesting, and it's possible that we could do something with like stickers as a currency, or kind of like picking. We thought of like the kind of one of the words that's really important to us is play, and again taking what kind of used to be a really kind of flat, boring experience of kind of like old school vBulletin text boards and making a media kind of focused, really rich and really playful kind of experience around just kind of sharing and iterating on media collectively. And so we think that like naturally lends itself to just more of a just kind of like fun, interactive, like gamey kind of feel. And so we haven't settled on anything yet, but I think that's the direction that we'd like to go in.
Oh man, you got a Siberian Husky here wearing glasses. I don't know what I think about that.
Joel, get out Joel has his checkbook like literally out because you have that site.
That's right.
I was thinking, Chris, like it almost would be fun for the stickers to be not just collectible, but perhaps, like you said, tradable, and I mean, at some point, maybe even like a card game.
Yeah, I mean that's actually something. So cards are really like I was thinking way back. Like Uno is a really fun game, right? Where you get to kind of like change rules on the fly, and just it's like a game, or like Nomic games where the kind of rules are generated by the community and are kind of constantly changing. So, playing kind of different actions at one another. So, I mean, again, there's a lot I think that we'll continue to kind of think about and explore in that direction.
I'm trying to vote on the Husky, but I had to log in, so now I'm gotta find it again. Oh, there we are. Oh, wait. Fetch me the paper. Oh, there's a lot of these Huskies with the glasses. This is a whole... Oh, man, this is going to take me too long. All right, Jeff, you're going to have to run the conversation for a while.
You've locked him in. This Husky thing.
I'm just thinking that my dog would, if you put glasses on his face, would instantly shake them off. Like instantly.
Not if you tape them on.
I don't know if you could hold them still long enough.
Can't you try to do the treat thing, Joel, where he has to sit very still? I've seen people do that with dogs.
I don't think they can do that. You can do that with Siberians. Siberians are just not amused. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. You could barely pet a Siberian Husky. They're too aloof.
Okay, I'll just tackle him the next time I see him.
Let's talk about the internet the devastation bill in front of Congress right now for about 5 minutes.
Sopa.
Here's my. Let me give my summary, which I think I'm now. I must say that the research that I have done is not up to my usual standards, because I heard all kinds of smart people saying this bill was bad, and then they gave me the various reasons. But one thing essentially what is technically happening, and we know this because our investor called the senator and said, "Why the hell are you sponsoring this bad bill?" And the senator said, "Well, because Hollywood wants it, and they spend way more money on congressional campaigns than the so-called technology industry. So we're going to give it to them, and we're going to pretend it's a jobs bill and push it through." Why does Hollywood want it? Because they can't shut down. They've been having trouble shutting down websites in foreign countries that are not under U.S. jurisdiction. And they want the ability, which they already sort of have, but essentially they want the ability to be able to go after internet service providers in the United States who are doing things like resolving DNS entries. So if the site's name is piratesrus. Let's pick a country at random, Iran, and DNS looks that up, the Hollywood essentially can't reach that site because it's in Iran. So they want to be able to go after United States ISPs and get them to basically break DNS for that site, which is stupid because it won't even prevent the piracy, because we work around that in about 5 minutes. But that's what they want. And one of the things it does is it really kind of wreaks havoc on the already existing DMCA provisions for taking down copyright for dealing with copyright content online. Right? Anybody? So,
yeah, I mean, there's a few other things it does too with U.S.-based payment processors and ad
that's
networks,
right.
and
They also
being
want
able
to prevent
force Google to strip results from their index.
So the idea has been a long time ago that if you I'll tell the story. I'll go way back in time because I like to tell long stories.
Let me get a soda.
It probably does. A long time ago, people tried to sue the telephone company for allowing people to have phone calls in which illegal things took place. And the telephone company said, that's ridiculous. You can't sue us because other people are having phone conversations that you don't approve of. And just because the concept of common carrier came into law, which basically said the phone company is just connecting two people's voices, and they bear no liability for what happens on that common channel. So essentially, when the internet was founded, we had these sites where people could go and upload stuff, and other people could then download it from those sites, like 4chan or Stack Overflow. And on those sites, essentially, I think the old law, we were kind of hoping that this common carrier provision would still hold, which said that, listen, if Joe Schmo uploads a copyrighted video, you can go after Joe Schmo, but you can't go after the site that is merely allowing uploads. They hold no liability. That was the original hope. Now, the content industry used their first round of buying off Congress to pass the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA. And under that, we have a way that basically says that as long as you give the copyright holder a method that they have to follow to state that there is a copyright infringement, and as long as the internet provider follows certain procedures about taking down things that they know to be copyright infringement because they've been notified by the copyright holder, then the website has sort of a safe harbor, and they can't be held liable any further than that. So let's walk through an example. You've got I'll make a real example based on Stack Overflow. We get a notice from somebody. This is a true example of something that actually happened. We get a notice from somebody saying one of the questions from your site is a copyright question that we use for interview questions, and we're giving these interviews as a take-home interview for programmers. And
right,
so,
programmers.
Yeah, so
on
if
Stack
they
Overflow.
that was on programmers. Well, whatever, it's on our network. So essentially somebody had literally copied and pasted this question from their take-home interview onto the site, and it had gotten answered. And it was a good question and a good answer that was making the internet better. Essentially, it was not something that we wanted to remove, so to speak. But it was a copyright violation. Now, ordinarily, if it wasn't for the DMCA, we couldn't necessarily track down the person who posted this. It's some anonymous internet user, and we're not a detective agency. And so the person that allegedly owns this copyright goes after the first person they can grab, which is us. And they send us an email saying, hey, take this down. This is my copyright information. And this is what's interesting here is that if we were just to say, okay, then anybody could cause any material to be removed from Stack Overflow just by claiming it was a copyright violation, and that would be bad. And that would break the internet because anytime somebody saw anything that they thought was libelous or that wasn't making them happy about the internet or that wasn't convenient for their business model of giving programmers interview questions or whatever their friggin' business model was, they could just destroy all kinds of internet content. So the truth is we are actually kind of obliged to ignore that request unless it corresponds to the DMCA takedown notice format, which requires them to basically state under penalty of perjury that they own the material and that they have a copyright on it, and then it's a violation. And then we'll take it down, and then we do if we get a DMCA takedown notice that meets all the requirements, which I think has happened maybe twice, where
it's a couple times, maybe 4 or 5 times.
It's kind of rare, and telling people no, we're not taking it down because you have to state under penalty of perjury and then sign in a letter that this is your copyright material deters a lot of people that don't actually own the copyright, but they're just trying to get something taken down to be a nuisance,
right?
Or because it doesn't, meet their needs. So that's and then there's a whole procedure which I won't even get into of how we then notify the person that the stuff was taken down for for copyright reasons, and they have an ability to object. It's very hard for us. Obviously, we can't police whether it's a copyright violation or not. We're in no position to do that. And we couldn't afford to do that on every single piece of content. So that was the existing system. The existing system is more or less working. It's non-ideal, but it's more or less working. And the reason it's important to websites like 4chan, Canvas, Stack Overflow, etc., is it allows us to get a so-called safe harbor. As long as we're following those rules, we cannot be held responsible for copyright infringement on our website. And the trouble with these SOPA laws is that they are basically going to, I don't want to say they're going to abolish all that. They're going to break that. They're going to break that whole system. And they're going to make it much, much harder to find safe harbors against copyright violation. And they're going to, essentially, if they pass as they are right now, they're going to create all kinds of opportunities for people who don't genuinely own copyrights to just cause all kinds of mayhem on sites. So that's the problem there.
And that's why there's a banner on Stack Overflow. And
yes.
People were complaining about it.
Yeah, so we put a banner up on Stack Overflow, and it's not the optimal way to get people's attention. But because our banners, our system messages are not really dismissible after you've seen them. So that's non-ideal, but it's what the technology allows.
I'm going to file a DMCA takedown on that banner. That's how I'm going to get that thing down. But no, this is really important. I mean, I've tweeted about it a few times, and I want to mention Lawrence Lessig. For me, it's like, okay, if whatever Lawrence Lessig says, that's the correct thing, and that's what we have to do.
Yes, I agree with you. Very good rule. Very good
rule of thumb. But he says, yes, SOPA is a problem. We should try to fight it as much as we can. But his point was the one you originally said, if you go way back, like, why was this passed? Well, somebody threw a bucket of money at politicians, and then things happen. And he's like, that's the thing we need to try to fix. Now, granted, this is like a really hard problem to solve.
Dave, wait,
I mean, let's fix government, right? Like, that's a much bigger thing to take on.
That's a bigger problem. I mean, Dave Weiner was on this show 2 weeks ago, right? And he said Congress and government is the same, and companies and corporations, it's the same thing. And we're like, well, you're exaggerating, Dave. It's not really the same thing. But you know what? Congress is not passing right now. They are completely unable to pass a single law to benefit the country because, things like how to fix the budget and get people employed, because the Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on a single thing. And the only laws that they're passing, it's shocking that these laws are sailing through right now, is things that companies have paid for. They passed the America Invents Act.
Well, actually, what they're very good at, too, is blocking things they don't want. I don't know if anyone saw this, but I think it was last week. The USDA tried to pass new food guidelines for school lunches.
Yes.
And basically all of the manufactured food companies paid Congress a bunch of money to reject it. So that is why now, according to the U.S. federal government, the tomato paste on pizza is a vegetable.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Yeah, by the way, the tomato paste on pizza is only like 30% tomato.
Yeah. Is it really? What else?
Yeah.
What else could they put
sugar.
in?
It's basically like sugar paste.
To quote the Daily Show, it's basically a chemistry lesson. Like, it's monosodium glutamate. No, there's no MSG in it, but there's all kinds of just crap, chemicals in it. But God forbid we do things that are sane and logical when someone can pay us to do otherwise.
But what's interesting is that these laws that have corporate backing are essentially sailing through unimpeded. I mean, the American Invents Act passed with no opposition at all. Just sailed right through. Nobody would look at it. We tried to put a dent in the law, and nothing happened.
This one, so far it sounds like there has been some backlash now against SOPA from members of Congress. Yeah,
this one actually is extremely unpopular, and hopefully if more sites like Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow,
Tumblr did a great one on the last one.
Good one. If more of these sites can get their users to understand that the sites could possibly be blown out of existence by somebody that had a vendetta against us.
And if YouTube put up that roadblock,
why doesn't Google do that on YouTube?
Well, they did it. They took out a full page Yahoo, Google, Facebook. I mean, they took out a full page ad in the
but they didn't
New York
shut off
Times,
their
and they
website.
sent out.
Yeah, but if they put that roadblock up on their website, I mean, that would just flood every congressional office with so many calls.
I can't get my videos.
I think they're doing 20 billion streams a month now.
Wow. They only have to put it on 1% of them.
Well, I do want to mention the Lessig book. I mean, I think SOPA, everybody should read up on SOPA. I mean, it's generally regarded by most technological people who have a clue as a very bad thing. You can just take our word for it, or you can go read about it yourself. But if you want to look at the deeper problem of, like, throwing a bunch of money at Congress is how things get done, whether those things should happen or not, then the book is called Republic Lost, How Money Corrupts Congress and a Plan to Stop It by Lawrence Lessig.
It's a great
I think
book.
it is inspiring. I don't think I could ever do But one of the original guys at Reddit went on to become sort of a political programmer evangelist, right? I'm trying to remember his
Alexis.
name.
No,
no,
it was
who was arrested?
Aaron Schwartz.
Aaron Schwartz. And I admire that greatly because to me, like government, that's like, we do some governmental stuff on Stack Exchange. Like that's what we're trying to do is produce sustainable systems of organization, which requires some form of government, right? That's just inevitable. But like attacking the real government problem, my God, that's like the holy grail. Like you need people as smart as Lawrence Lessig to be on the case because there's just no way. I mean, Joel, you dabble, I think, a little bit in this, right? But man, I can't imagine. It's just
a limit to how many things I can work on at any given time. What you need is somebody who is independently wealthy and therefore untouchable, like essentially does not care if they lose their job or piss off their investors or anything like that, who can just kind of work on their, work on their conscience. Is that a different word than conscious?
Yes.
We can do this thing together.
They both have to do with the mind, but they are different.
Yeah, I'm going to have trouble with that.
One's a cricket.
American, if you're concerned about this, SOPA specifically, the website right now to go to is americancensorship.org. And they got about 1 billion links to all kinds of explanations and videos and calls to action and different things you can do. And it is fairly effective to call your congressman. They're going to respond with a form letter saying, "We love this bill. This is amazing. It will help the Disney Corporation, and it will stop terrorism." Yeah, and create jobs.
Oh, the MPAA tried to draw a link between piracy and terrorism.
Yeah.
After 9/11.
Yes, and communism and all that
because the Taliban is really into digital piracy.
No, whatever works for you with your stupid propaganda. However, I do know that senators do basically sit there and they tally the incoming calls and they pay attention to how many they got and whether it was a phone call or just an automated email that you got sent from one of those generated websites does get counted, but not for very much.
But customize email. If you're going to send one of those, customize the email. Even by just changing that first paragraph up, it gets your email counted a lot more because it shows you.
How about Joel? How about an e-card? Can I send an e-card?
You can send an e-card to say, "I will not vote for you."
Yes, with a big sad face on it.
This is really weird. I'm actually.
Well, hold on. One thing I did want to interject that might actually be useful is the impression I got from Matt Cutts, because Matt Cutts was the first person I saw talk about this in earnest, was specific states where you could actually make a difference. Like here in California, I don't know it. I got the impression you had to be in certain states for your, that's where the pushing needed to happen.
Yeah, at times, depending, when it's in a committee and there's certain senators in that committee from those states, then it's more helpful to be a constituent of those senators. New York is one of them. But you need to tell your senators right now because it is likely to get pushed through and come to a full floor vote sometime soon. And then we need to kind of stop it.
Also, Ron Wyden, who's a senator out of Minnesota, I believe, is planning a filibuster, and you can actually submit. He's just going to basically read the names of every person who submits on his website saying, "I don't like this bill." That's going to be his filibuster.
That's cool.
He's already got 100,000 names to read for it. But
sweet.
Go submit your name, and you can be read as one of these people who's against it.
He's going to be like Joel Sapolaskansky, Sapol. Well, whatever.
And Jeff Spolsky. Those are the two people. It's a classic. That's good. Well, that is an important topic. I urge everybody, read about that. Check out the Lessig book. Educate yourselves about that. I think that's important. And I touched a little bit about this, the common carriage stuff you were talking about.
Yeah.
When I read that book, The Master Switch by Tim Wu, which is really, really excellent. The internet really is anomalous in that it is a communication network that is remarkably free, almost by design, of centralized control. Mm-hmm. And he made a case that historically, if you look at all the networks, they sort of started out free and then clamped down. Mm-hmm. Over time, and this is basically him being right. This is what happens, right? So you have to fight that. If you want a network that does have this concept of common carriage and isn't owned, and that everybody has a right to publish what they want to publish, you have to kind of fight for it, right? You have to push for the right thing to happen. The right thing doesn't just magically happen.
If you think about the history of telephones, that's something I find really interesting, which is that there were 1 million telephone companies all over the place. And they didn't interoperate, but they were very innovative because in order to compete, you built a telephone company and you added new interesting features to your telephone company. And, quietly AT&T started buying them all up. And then AT&T went and paid off Congress to get a monopoly for the entire United States. And they literally clamped down on innovation. All innovation came to a screeching halt, and you were not allowed for decades to attach any non-AT&T equipment to the network because they said that'll hurt our network if you plug in some kind of a crazy princess phone that you got from Radio Shack with a little football and
It's a really fascinating story. The book is The Master Switch by Tim Wu. It's a great, great book. And the interesting part about the Bell, the telephone network history, is they really were a benevolent dictatorship for a while. Like, they really sort of had this idea of, like, we're protecting the common good. This is like a common resource. We have to. And then it sort of just went sideways, right? Like it always does.
And then they just started trying to maximize their profits.
Exactly. But it did start out like it really was like there's people who have very fond memories of the Bell system. And there was a time when the Bell system was doing a bunch of research. And
that's because they had government guaranteed profits. They had government guaranteed profits. So they set their prices for phone. I mean, long distance calls in the United States were about $1. And this is in 1960s dollars a minute. Now they're 6 cents, I think, in 2010, 2012 dollars. 2011. What, does anyone know what year it is? Can I have another?
It's 2011.
Can I have another deli board with 4 digits this time?
What year is it?
I don't think we need a digital board. We can just use a piece of paper.
Thank you. I don't even remember what we're talking about, but it's true that Bell Labs, which invented the transistor and so on and so forth, and Unix, came out of the AT&T Bell system that they sort of spun off a research department because they had regulators who told them how much profit would guarantee them a certain amount of profit, let them set rates for phone calls based on how much profit they wanted to have, and that allowed them to basically run research laboratories and just say that that's an expense. Totally crooked. Oh, my God.
Yeah. But do read, I highly recommend that book, The Master Switch by Tim Wu. It'll give you the historical context for what's going on now, like this clamping down of the rights that we sort of already had.
Right.
So I think it's good to have context.
There's another way it gets clamped down, which is things that used to be on totally open systems. I'm thinking of like email, for example, was completely open, totally interoperable. There was no central source of email. There was DNS, but that wasn't even centralized really, other than .com, but that was centralized in a healthy way. But email was totally open, and we still have email, and that's awesome. But the kids these days don't use the email; they use Facebook, and that's not so open. Chat rooms.
But they can switch over to 4chan.
4chan. Send each other messages on the 4chan.
Exactly. I want to mention a couple things. One is you do have this concept of trip codes, which I hadn't heard of. It's basically sort of a checksum or hash that lets you tell if someone is who they say who they are.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a hash that's appended to your name based on a string that you enter after your name after using a hash, and it's a way to kind of have a semi kind of persistent identity. But the thing is, the original kind of like it's pretty easy to break the hashes. In fact, there are programs, and I think they even have like a GPU-based program that does this. But because it starts usually as people want a cool hash, and they want it to say, they want Joel, and then they want Spole, like they want to try to get as close to like their last, maybe not their last name, but like a character that they like, cool. or a word that they like. And so a lot of those get broken pretty quickly. But more or less, I mean, yeah. So people will use that to kind of maintain an identity, either in a specific. Actually, you see this a lot now with threads. Like somebody will post as OP, as like original poster, and then they'll have kind of on a per thread hash, just so people can verify. Oh, that's the thread creator here, and then they'll just kind of ditch it. So it's kind of interesting to have that. You still have like a persistence to your identity so long as you choose to have it, and then like that fluidity of being able to kind of, then they can just as easily kind of troll people or bump their own post as anonymous and then go back to, or ask themselves. Like there's this concept of posting as yourself. Like there's people will post as themselves and pretend to be different people to try to get their thread popular. It's interesting.
That's very cool. And then it sounds like
I love these emergent behaviors where you don't let people do what they want to do, but you let them control something in some way. And then they just sort of ride that as far as they can.
Yeah, definitely. Like the reverse engineering of the trip codes is hilarious, where they want specific strings in their Joel. It's like they want it to look cool, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically reversing the hash, not to crack it, but just because you want it to look awesome.
Right.
Is hilarious, right? That's awesome. That's perfect. I like that. That's beautiful.
You could sell vanity hash codes, actually.
Well, we actually have, too. We added years and years and years ago secure trip codes where, it's just a similar algorithm, but it uses a salt on our server that, is our salt. So nobody uses those, though. So they're much more secure and much harder to break, unless our salt is compromised, which to my knowledge it hasn't been. But nobody uses them because, obviously that salt is specific to 4chan, and all of these other kind of image board websites that use similar software, then you can't use your kind of same vanity trip code across sites. So it's kind of like, even if you're kind of tinfoil hatty and you don't want anybody to compromise your trip code, like just people don't use it.
Interesting. And it sounds like you do have some moderators.
Yeah,
and
no, we do.
What do you call janitors and
janitors,
moderators.
yeah. So I mean, there are I mean, the thing that a lot of people think is that it is a total Wild West, and there aren't rules, and there have never been rules. But we've had rules since day one. Essentially, the random board is unique in that it's compared to the rest of the boards, where it kind of has quote unquote no rules, with the exception of, again, don't break the law, don't spam, stuff like that. And there's also we make a little kind of notation that oh my God, no rules also applies to moderators, so moderators can kind of have their own little fits and go crazy banning people if they feel. We discourage that, but there are cases where we kind of point out, like, hey, look, they don't apply to you, they don't apply to us, let's have fun. But otherwise, I mean, all of the boards have a pretty basic set of rules that more or less just says, if you're posting on the anime board, post anime. If you're posting on the cards board, post cards.
Stay on topic.
Yeah, pretty much stay on topic. And then the moderators are, given, they are instructed to, enforce just the board rules, not kind of personal taste. But when you think about the number of moderators we have relative to the number of users and active posters and just raw number of posts per day, it is like, it's David versus Goliath. I mean, we have less than probably 50 moderators and janitors, and we have something like 1 million people a day visit the site and say a few 100,000 posts every day. So it is an uphill battle.
What about the janitors thing?
Janitors are just a sub-moderator where they're kind of like the front line is the users themselves. Post good content, discourage bad content, and they have the ability to report posts, and it goes into a queue. And the janitors then have access to that queue, and the only thing they can do is they can delete content, and they're usually assigned to specific boards. We want people that really kind of spend a lot of time on an individual board and really kind of grok the culture and aren't going to delete things kind of willy-nilly that they don't really understand. And then they can request bans from moderators, and then the moderators can then kind of go in and fill it. So they're kind of like almost a cross between like a moderator, but more of a community ambassador. And
how do those people get chosen? I mean, what's the process?
That's the challenge, right? The reason we don't have more than 50 people is that it's how do you select good people in an anonymous community, right? I mean, you guys have this where you can look at karma and post history and all these like wonderful things to give you kind of a base, like a gut check on, is this the kind of guy we want to trust with this? And we don't have any of that. And so the janitors are selected. We have an application process where...
No, I got it at random.
Right. People actually think that like that because people will post these fake threads where they say if you post and you get this post number, you become a mod. And I get emails every few weeks where somebody's like, hey, I won the contest in that thread, can you make me a mod now? I'm like, no. So people actually apply though, and our application is pretty lengthy. It's and we ask you for what's your name, what's your handle, what's your time zone.
Oh, you can apply. Okay, if it's known that you can apply, it is self-selecting.
But we only do it in batches, and so every probably once every other year. And the last batch that we did, I think, was about a year ago, and we got something like over 9,000 applications in something like 24 hours.
Wow.
The other thing I want to mention is it says here in Wikipedia that you deleted some boards in in January. Because they had devolved so badly, you felt like they shouldn't even exist. Yeah,
so I actually undid that. So that's interesting. So we had two boards. There was a board called Robot 9000, which is based on an XKCD comic or something that Randall had done with implementing this kind of script that detected duplicate comments in an IRC chat room, and then would kind of devoice or kick ban people for kind of saying. Repeating phrases, and so we implemented this on the board where we just kind of like took a post, collapsed it, truncated it, hashed it, and so theoretically you weren't able to repeat the same things, and so the thought being that it would really encourage original content because you couldn't spam the same old memes, and it also did the same thing with images. It just looked at the image MD5, and so it started as almost kind of like post original content and like the thinking man's /B. But as it turns out, the only thing that is unique after 2 years is relationship drama, and everybody has their own horrible, story about dating, and so it became more of a kind of a hangout for, it was just like dating advice and like hanging out and just kind of like they refer to it as like baw, like people just kind of whining, and so it became very different from kind of what it had originally set out to, and eventually I just was kind of frustrated with that and said, look, this is not at all what we had in mind. It's kind of long since diverged from what it was created to do, and so I removed that. And then I also deleted a board that was called News, because News became essentially like the de facto political discussion, and again, political with a tinge of 4chan is a pretty interesting mix.
Yeah.
So that also, and again, so that became kind of like very racist and kind of crazy, and I just said, look, again, you guys aren't even talking about news at this point. You're just like shitting on one another and everybody under the sun. And so I removed both boards, and I just re-added them actually as of probably about a month or two ago, but I re-added them because I felt bad about just within kind of a few keystrokes eradicating two communities on the site of users that people really liked, and I re-added them though. But this time I basically said to the Robot 9000 guys, I said, okay, I get it. This is what you want to do here. I'm okay with that now. And the same thing with the news board. We added it back as Poole, as politically incorrect. And I said specifically, I was like, okay, you guys can be, say whatever the hell you want here. You don't have to just talk about kind of straight news. And so I'm okay with you guys kind of being racy and crazy.
Why didn't you rename R9K to something closer to what it's actually becoming?
I think because people actually, they really they came to identify with, they call themselves robots. Like R9K. They kind of created a whole culture around the robot and the script that was kind of blocking the dupe posts and just the way that they would kind of reference one another. And so that's what they wanted. And actually the thing that really kind of forced my kind of made me re-add them is there's another community that you might be familiar with called Encyclopedia Dramatica.
Yeah.
And ED was basically like the troll wiki, right? It was the unwiki where it was.
That's where the Leave Britney Alone came from.
Is it?
Yeah.
So ED started as originally, I think it was intended to be a site to kind of catalog live journal drama, if we all remember live journal drama. And it very quickly became kind of a chronicle of image board culture. Really a lot of the 4chan culture was kind of documented there. But again, all with this kind of not like Know Your Meme style, where it's tries to be very kind of academic and understanding the origin of a meme and all those things. But very trolly, very just like just out there. But it had this really like hilarious. It was kind of horrible, but like hilarious, and it was incredible in its own way. And the proprietor of that site, this girl Vinyl, Sherrod, deleted it without warning, and that community had been up for like 5 years, or 5 or 6 years, and she just killed it. And she like ramrodded them into this new community called O Internet, which is meant to be essentially, it's Know Your Meme. It's kind of like a cleaned up, sterilized version of ED without any of that troll humor.
Right.
And people were like understandably just livid and upset because which is with a drop of the hat. This thing that they'd come to love and feel a part of over the years, and again, spent lots of time creating content and spreading content. Just
went away.
in an instant, it went away. And so I realized that I think that was like an atrocity as far as destroying. Again, she didn't pass it an archive to anybody; she just killed it.
Right.
And I looked at what I'd done, and I said, look, I did the same thing. I thought that was horrible, and I said, well, I'm a total hypocrite if I don't admit to myself that I did something on a kind of a smaller scale, but just as kind of insensitive and stupid. And so
it's hard to tell. We have these tiny communities around Stack Exchange sites that aren't working that well, that have 3 or 4 people there, and we feel very bad about pulling the plug on them because we don't know if there really is a community there that feels that way, or if this is just sort of a few accidental people that won't really mind. When we have in a few cases, I won't name names, but if you go to stackexchange.sites and sort by traffic and scroll all the way down to the bottom, you find some sites that have barely active participation, 1 meta post a month, the truth is we probably want to close down the 3 or 4 least active sites. But we always
still
feel
in beta, technically.
Yeah, they're in beta. They should have another chance. And we're always imagining the people on the other side there saying, they're getting value out of it. Why take this away from them?
I think it's important to do that. Like when we add boards, we usually say, look, this is a trial.
Yeah.
And but I think that one of the mistakes I've made is that it's kind of like the length of that trial period and the kind of success metric is totally ambiguous.
Sure. It kind of is for us too. We do have official. There are things that we measure, but it's
hard. Yeah,
there aren't clear cutoffs. Like you have to be above this number.
Hold on, there is one key difference. The wiki model you're creating, what I like to call national parks. These are permanent artifacts, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas what you're creating, Chris, is on 4chan at least, not necessarily Canvas, is streams, like rivers, right? Like
a
water
place,
that flows.
A place. Well, it's almost like a meeting place. Right?
It's a meeting place, but everything's always changing. There's no permanent artifacts, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't. But it's a little bit different, and that's my only point. Is I don't think those two models can be treated exactly the same way, because I think what we do is we try to teach the community, look, the importance here is we're creating this park for people to enjoy. To the extent that your community is not creating a park that's livable for other people to enjoy in, then it shouldn't exist, right? It's not about your community, it's about the creation of the park. You're caretakers of this park. You're forest rangers in this park. And to the extent that that's not working, nobody can come in and visit your park. There's getting no value out of it. The park is really tiny. It's just, there's no parking at the park. It doesn't work, right? There's too many bears, whatever it is, right? The park's not working.
Yeah.
Your community kind of needs to go away because you failed at your fundamental purpose, which is to create the park, not to be a community. That's not really the point. I mean, if you get that, that's great, but you got to create the park, right? And I don't know that really works for the streams because it's just, okay, it's a river. You just put stuff in, and every day it's different. Every minute it's different, right?
Yeah, but I think that, I mean, what we've seen in the past is some boards just, again, they don't work because they just don't have, say, much to talk about. I think you mentioned in the past, Joel, the atheism.
Yeah.
Where it's just, as it turns out, after 90 days, like everything's, it's like you just run out of steam.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that in some cases. I can't even think of a specific example. We've seen the same thing happen, though, in the sense that some just don't get huge, right? Like the kind of papercraft and origami board that I mentioned earlier. It's really, really tiny. I think it's the slowest board on the site. But at the same time, it kind of self-governs, right? It doesn't, because very few people use it, it doesn't use a lot of bandwidth. And because nobody really goes there to break rules, it doesn't take a lot of our time in terms of moderation and whatnot. And it's developed a really, again, like there are, say, a few thousand people that use it every month, but they just love it. And that's where, they've created kind of their own little community there.
There's probably a gigantic origami board someplace that these are the refugees of that gigantic origami board. So we have similar problems where we might launch a site like our quantitative finance site that never gets enough traffic because there is a mega quantitative finance site somewhere else running awful software, but it is such a center of gravity that it's just, you only get the people that for some reason haven't found the site that everybody else is using.
Well, I think actually that's an interesting point too, is that, for the center of gravity on 4chan is /B, right? It's the random board. I mean, I call it not center of gravity, but a gateway drug where a lot of people come in because they know 4chan for the culture that's produced by random. And random is this kind of just an experience to behold and when you first use it.
The people that participate in random that are also interested in origami will go to your origami board. Right. Just like we can fill up an auto mechanics site with programmers that are interested in auto mechanics, but we don't get the real auto mechanics on our auto mechanics site.
Yeah, I think your model is interesting, and it's different because, right, like you've sharded. I mean, you've taken a kind of a format, right, a platform that really works well for, and you shard it out to these very distinct kind of interspace communities. Whereas we don't, we have this kind of really interesting umbrella culture, but then we kind of drill down into all these different topics, categories on the same site. And so, right, you can come in to be as the gateway drug, and I think this is what happens. A lot of people eventually graduate in a sense because they start to, after they kind of peek out of what else is there here that I can look at, they go, oh wow, it turns out the anime board is pretty good, and the sports board is awesome, and the origami board exists, and people then kind of eventually kind of wean themselves off of that, and I think they grow up too, right? I mean, like people come in as an 18-year-old, they're probably really interested in the humor and whatnot, and by the time they're 21, they're like more interested in like fashion and like cooking, and they might find some utility out of those boards. So I think that's part of it.
Alex is giving me all kinds of sign language things, which say that we've probably gone rather long. So I'll pretty much cut it off. But Chris, do you have like a blog other than you've got your Moot on Twitter, right?
Yeah, I have the Moot on Twitter.
MOOT.
Yep, and I also have the 4chan, the number 4 CHAN, and then Canvas is CANV _ AS. No, as a Twitter, yeah.
As your Twitter account. And then people should check out, people that are afraid to check out 4chan because sometimes it gives you a heart attack, should go to canv.as. Check them both out. I think that 4chan is very interesting, even if it's not your kind of community, to see what that community is doing with that. But don't do it at work. What else?
Canvases work safe. That's actually, there you go.
Really?
That's a big difference.
I don't know. People are like, why are you looking at pictures of huskies at work? It's okay at Stack Overflow, but
we're doing our job right. It's work safe.
It's not. At least there's no. There's nothing racy. Cool. Thank you very much for being on.
Yeah. No. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it.
Much appreciated. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye,
everybody.